Mr. Jordan. Thank you for taking this interview with us. It's a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and, of course, your media consumers, your readers.
Mr. Jordan, if Labor is elected in the upcoming federal election, what immediate policy changes are we going to see?
Well, we want to make sure that we properly fund our schools and our universities, our childcare and our TAFE. We want to make sure that we restore funding to Medicare, that we decrease the out-of-pocket costs for people who need to see a doctor or a specialist. And we're going to fix up climate change, and we're going to start making policies which start taking action, which will also help business and families pay less for their energy costs. So it's cost of living, it's making sure that everyone gets a fair go, and of course we also want to make sure that amongst all of this, that we provide bigger, fairer tax cuts to millions of Australian wage earners.
One of your main policies is to make changes to negative gearing and the capital gains tax. What is your view on the impact this may have on the Australian economy and the housing market?
Well, it'll be positive for the economy, and of course it won't have any appreciable impact on the housing market. Experts from the Treasury Department through to housing experts have all said that removing a tax subsidy in the future to help an investor buy a house just levels the playing field for first home buyers. We've also said that our changes to housing tax policy are not retrospective. In other words, if any of your viewers or their family have bought an investment property and are getting a subsidy from the government, that won't change. In other words, our changes will be from a date in the future. So after that date, if you buy an existing house, you won't get a subsidy from the government. What we will keep doing though is that if you buy new apartments off the plan, or if you buy a house and 12 months later you substantially rebuild it, you'll still be able to access and get a tax subsidy. For us, it's about fairness. A lot of parents these days worry about whether or not their kids will be able to afford to buy a house. All the parents think they're going to have to pay for their kids' house as well as their own. We're going to change that. We're going to keep the dream of owning your own home alive.
What is your view on the recent proposed cut and capping on the annual immigration intake to 160,000? Do you support this, or would you change this under your government?
Well, I think the government's using immigration as a political football, trying to play one part of the community off against the other. It is always very important that our immigration levels don't pass our infrastructure investment. This government's actually not really changing anything. Last year, the number of Australian citizens, people who became Australian citizens, was 162,000. Next year, the government says, wow, it'll be 160,000. It's a 1% change. Really what the government's trying to do is make it look like it's doing something when it's not doing much at all. If we want to fix congestion in our cities, what we need to do is properly fund our roads, our railway services. What we need to do is make sure that our schools and hospitals keep up with population. This government has let cuts occur in all of these areas, and then what they're doing is they're trying to blame immigration for a lack of action by the government.
Following Michael Daly's election loss in New South Wales, what do you think this means for Labor at the upcoming election?
I think what it means is that Mr. Daly made a mistake in his comments in the last week about saying housing affordability was the fault of one particular population group. He was wrong to say it. It was wrong to think it. Mr. Daly's now done the right thing and recognised that he should step aside as Labor leader. So the Labor Party very clearly wants to send a message to all groups in Australia. We're pro-migration. Of course, we've got to get the number right and make sure it's done. The people who come here adhere to our laws. And of course, we've got to make sure that we prioritise family reunion and skilled migration, as well as a few some refugees. But one thing which has been said sometimes in some media is that because Labor want to see sick refugees on Nauru given proper medical treatment, somehow that'll mean that family reunion or skilled visa migration will be affected. That's not correct. I want to reassure people that we are committed to a platform which sees people come from all parts of the world and that family reunion and skilled migration is part of it. In terms of what Mr. Daly said, I think that election was largely on state issues, but I want to make it very clear yet again, any comments about a particular group of our population, including people from China or anywhere else, they were wrong. I'm the leader of the Labor Party nationally, and Mr. Daly has stepped aside now.
If Labor is elected, would you propose any new policies towards China? What is your assessment of the coalition's China policy?
I think the current government's been sending mixed messages on its China policy. It wants to keep America happy and it wants to sound tough on China, but it also wants the benefits of increasing trade with China. What I will do is maintain our security relationship with the United States, but I don't have a worst case scenario or a doom and gloom scenario about the rise of China. The rise of China should be welcome. It is inevitable anyway. And what we need to do is understand how we can build better cooperation. So I have the view that we should speak Australian foreign policy with an Aussie accent, not from anywhere else. And I just stress that we'll take a very proactive and positive view to our relations with China.
What are the plans for the Labor government to reduce the national debt level?
Well, under this government, readers might be surprised to learn the debt has doubled. This government love to say that they're business people and they know all about money. Well, clearly they know how to run up the debt. Did you know that in 2013, when Tony Abbott was elected, the first of 3 Liberal Prime Ministers, I mean, we've had Abbott, then Turnbull, now the current fellow, but back then, debt, national debt, was about $9,000 for every man, woman and child. Now, it's north of $21,000. This government has doubled the debt in 6 years. So what we need to do is make economic reforms, wind back unsustainable tax subsidies, stop giving money to, giving a tax-free holiday to large corporations. Unlike the current government, I will never give a corporate tax cut to the big banks of $17 billion. So we've got sensible economic measures to push down the debt. We can also, because of our economic reforms, and you mentioned some of them early, winding back unsustainable concessions, for example, in negative gearing, that gives us the room to reduce the debt, pay for our schools and hospitals, and provide bigger, better, fairer tax cuts for millions of Australian wage earners.
What are your views on the One Nation Party?
That party is an extremist party. Some of their people and some of their views are racially motivated, and what we need to do is put them last on our how to vote cards. This country is not a big country in population, not like China, but we're occupants of a whole continent. We all need each other to do well. So that's why I don't think we should be picking on migrants. I do think we need to look for all of the regions. We need to make sure that working people get proper pay and wages, that small businesses don't drown in red tape, that we build great train lines as well as great roads in our cities, and that we encourage people to move to the regions. It's why it's important that we actually take real action on climate change, because renewable energy will mean that we pay less for our household and business energy bills in the future. But the One Nation Party are very extreme. Only this week, they've been caught out, selling off Australia to the American gun associations for $10 and $20 million, promising for large amounts of money to water down our gun laws. This is not the sort of people that we want in federal parliament.
You've recently been very active in the Chinese community, having your WeChat account as well, engaging with live streams with the Chinese audience. How has that been for you?
It's overdue. I've always been active in the various communities in Melbourne. When I was a union rep, I worked with people from all backgrounds and nationalities to get them a better deal on wage rises. But I have a very simple philosophy about Australians of Chinese background, be they from the mainland or Hong Kong or other parts of Asia, or if indeed they've been here for many generations. No one ever complains when a Chinese Australian family moves next door, because they've got values of love of family, respect for hard work, they value education. No shopping centre in the suburbs or the small towns is ever unhappy when Chinese Australian business people, small business people move in, because you know that they're going to work late, they'll pay their taxes, they'll adhere to the law, and they just want to do well for their family and for the country. So, I'm looking forward to further expanding our commitment. We've got fabulous Chinese Australians running in some of our seats in Parliament, and I'm very excited for some of them to get elected. So our Parliament is as diverse as our population.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Shorten.
No, thank you. They're lovely questions. Lovely to talk to you. Best wishes to your readers.
Thank you so much.